9 o'clock on your Wednesday morning. Welcome in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Belcher along with you here. Jack coming in hot this morning, fresh out of Charlotte after a late game last night with South Carolina and North Carolina up there at Truist Field, not Truist Park, Truist Field where the Charlotte Knights play. Looked like a beautiful night. Obviously, that's a very cool venue with the backdrop, the city, and all that kind of stuff. I could hear Kendall during the commercial breaks doing her hosting and talking to fans and all that kind of stuff. Unfortunately, not a good night for the Gamecocks.
No, very, very, very long game. Emphasis on the very, because that was a near 4-hour game, man. And
I think it hit 4 hours right on the number.
It wouldn't surprise me. It felt like an eternity sitting there last night. And luckily, it was a competitive game, I guess, until the final 2 innings. But yeah, man, just got back in like 5 minutes ago and ready to roll for a busy morning with everything going on. And yeah, we got ready to talk some baseball here. How
glad are you that the series is at home this weekend?
Very glad, because the next 2 weekends, as you know, I'm on the road, man, and I think I'm on the road again in the middle of April too. So it's like 3 weekends next month. I'm out of town, so I'm looking forward to being at home, for a little bit here, even if South Carolina doesn't play well. That's a whole nother story, and yeah, man, just looking forward to being in Columbia for once this weekend.
Now, will you drive to Mississippi?
So yeah, I'll drive to Mississippi State. I'll fly to Texas A&M the following week.
Okay.
And then it's like 2 weeks later. It's like the weekend after the spring game for football. They go to Kentucky, and I'll drive that. So I'm gonna rack up a lot of miles. But hey, I did get a new car, so that's
okay.
That's right. Like, we're fresh on miles, man.
So the truck would just.
So
what happened with that?
Here's what happened. So for those of you who don't know or haven't been keeping up, my truck, I had a Toyota Tacoma for years, like since like 2020. The engine just stopped, like the light came on, and then there was a bunch of issues with the engine. So it was just like, it got to the point where it's like we had already put a little bit of money in to fix the engine, thought it was fixed, the light came back on, and then we ended up just selling the car. And I had my grandmother's, to the delight of everyone, because I got flagged down by coworkers and random people asking to take pictures of the car. I drove a Mini Cooper for about a month and a half. Top down, great experience. I'd love to do it again. So
it probably looks a little funny with you driving that.
It looks like a clown car, to be honest, man. But now I'm driving another truck, much bigger. I'm getting used to it. I don't really like driving super big cars, but this truck just so happens to be a little bit bigger.
Like a Tacoma's like a mid-sized truck.
Yeah, Tacoma's a mid-size. So I have a GMC now, so it's a little bit bigger. I like driving it. It's nice.
Is it a Sierra?
It's a Canyon. So
Okay.
Yeah.
So they're mid-sized. Okay.
Yeah. So it's mid-sized to me, just a little bit bigger than the Tacoma. But hey, first time driving it was like 2 days ago. So shout out to
getting some miles on it.
Yeah, get some miles on it, man. So driving in this morning was brutal, man. Very, very long night, and did not get a ton of sleep.
How much coffee have you had so far?
I don't really like drink coffee like that, to be honest, man.
Like caffeine at all?
No, I haven't. I've had water this morning, but because I left at like 7,
right?
And it's like an hour 45 with traffic and stuff.
That is really good. You got in here just before 9. That's really good timing. Especially the time of day.
Because I had texted you I was going to make it at like 8:56, and I'm like dealing with traffic in Charlotte.
Well, I was fully prepared to start the show and be like, okay, well, he's going to roll in at about 9:05.
Yeah,
hopefully.
That's what I was thinking. I was going to miss the first segment, but nah, man. Once I got out of Charlotte, though, the traffic was just not existent. Something about going into a major city or even leaving a city.
Yeah,
I don't know, but I'm happy to be back in Columbia now. I haven't been here since. Gosh,
a few days.
It's since like Wednesday last week. So
that's crazy.
It's been a while, man. But that's baseball.
Glad to have you back. We'll unpack what happened last night on the other side of the 9 a.m. sandstorm. Pick me up.
Time to get hyped.
Here's your 9 a.m. Sandstorm.
Sponsored by George Sink Injury Lawyers. Just call all nines.
It is time for your 9 a.m. Sandstorm Pick Me Up, brought to you by South Carolina's largest injury law firm, George Sink Injury Lawyers. If you've been hurt in the car or at work, call George Sink now at 803 all nines. 4 hours, 21 runs, and at the end of the day, South Carolina has yet another loss. Their fourth in a row. They're ninth out of 10 games against ranked opponents as they fall to the Tar Heels 13-8. Last night up there in Charlotte at Truist Field, home of the Charlotte Knights, and at least they were more competitive than they were over the weekend. Like this was a tie game late at all 8, and then the wheels came off again.
Of course, because that's the trend lately is to this literally happened on Sunday, dude. Like South Carolina had just tied the game at 4 against Arkansas, not even like 10 minutes prior, I think. And then bottom of the 8th inning, Arkansas scores 7 runs off South Carolina pitching. And last night, same deal. They fought back from an 8-3 deficit, scored 4 runs in the 6th, then got 1 more to tie the game on a Bo Hollins double in the 7th. And it's looking like, all right, brand new ball game. Your pitching's doing a little bit better. Pitching was, as we'll get into, not very good last night. And then, of course, right on cue, like literally, I'll look at the timestamps of when they tied the game and then when they blew it, because I mean, it felt like the span of 5 minutes, man. Like Zach Russell gives up 3 straight hits, including a 2-run homer, and South Carolina just could not pitch well in that 8th inning. It was just rough, man. It was very rough. And as I'm looking at the timestamps, 10 o'clock p.m. I tweeted out that Bo Hollins had tied the game. 10:04, Zach Russell took the mound. 10:07. So in the span of 7 minutes, South Carolina tied the game, and then UNC took the lead, and that was that.
Yeah, again, like you said over the weekend, the 8th inning just seems to be the bugaboo for this team, and you come up to bat in the bottom of the 8th, and suddenly you're once again down by 5 runs, and obviously weren't able to dig out of that hole. And man, the pitching. Look, we knew going into this game, you were going to be at a little bit of a disadvantage because Jarvis Evans got burned by being used on Sunday. So your usual midweek guy who had been doing great and actually had a really decent outing, all things considered, on Sunday, pitching on short rest. Like, okay, you're going to have to go with the bullpen game. What's going to happen here? You just kind of hope they were going to be able to piece it together. They couldn't. For one, they couldn't keep the ball in the park. It's so funny. It was only a couple weeks ago we were talking about, man, it's still cold and the ball's not flying. It's flying now. You're getting in the mid-70s, and a warm night like last night, the ball was flying left and right for South Carolina and for UNC. I mean, South Carolina started off the game with back-to-back homers by, Nathan Hall and Ethan Petrie, and we thought, oh, it's great start of things, but obviously North Carolina was able to hit the ball pretty well. Thing that bugs me, 11 walks. You had 12 pitchers take them out, 11 walks combined last night. You were just giving them free pass after free pass.
Yeah, I mean, and it's insane that 13 3 passes in general with 2 hit by pitches. I mean, you're never going to win when you're just putting guys on base as frequently as South Carolina is. And look, you used 12 pitchers last night, and I asked Paul Maneri after the game, were there any thoughts on bringing guys back out for another inning, like Brendan Sweeney, for instance, who got the start on the mound and pitched well for 1 inning. And I think that was enough for him, but I would have been fine with seeing him for another inning. And then you have Caleb Jones, who hadn't pitched since March 4th, and he pitched scoreless inning in the 7th before Russell came in and blew the game. And maybe I understand not bringing Caleb back out for another inning because he hasn't pitched in so long. You want to keep his confidence where it is. But you're trying to win a baseball game at the end of the day, are you not? And Russell's been pretty good this year, but as we've gotten into SEC play, it's become increasingly apparent that he is just not fully immersed or ready for SEC hitting at this point to face. And I think he'll be better over time. But man, last night was just it was just rough for the pitching staff in general. Like, it was not just Russell's fault. It was, there were a lot of guys that struggled last night.
Yeah, and I guess the theory behind it is wanting to make sure you have everybody available for this weekend, because guess what? You're going to need all hands on deck to take on Tennessee, and, you're going to be lucky to be able to score at least one win in the series this weekend. So I want to make sure you didn't burn anybody that wouldn't be available for this weekend or not be fresh enough for this weekend. I guess is kind of your reasoning behind that. But even in a bullpen night, you never expect to see 12 different guys take the mound.
No, and it's just like the reason why the game went so long last night, and it's on both sides because UNC had a lot of pitching changes too. It's just that. I mean, it's every inning someone new was on the mound, and it was literally any time like a guy would start like pitching in their outing, there'd be someone in the bullpen already, and then as soon as something bad happened, Pulmonary makes a trip to the mound, takes a guy out, and makes a change, and it was just constantly like that last night. And yeah, look, your bullpen, I'm concerned. I will definitely now say that for sure. Because you even threw some of your higher leverage guys last night.
Sure.
Like Parker Marlott did not look great. Sweeney was probably the best looking one.
Yeah.
And, after that, it just kind of went downhill.
And through a lot of non-conference play, we talked about the bullpen being a strength of this team. Pitching in general was looking really strong for the most part. But now that you've played several series, including several other games against ranked opponents, you blew the game against Oklahoma in game number 3. You had a tie game on Sunday against Arkansas that got blown wide open. You have what happened last night happen in the 8th inning. Like, again, this has become a major concern for this team for something that we thought initially was going to be a strength.
Yeah, it's just you come back to tie the game, man, and it's like not even 5 minutes later, it felt like it's just the lead was gone. And that's probably the most disappointing part about last night is that the offense gave you a chance to win the game. Like they started out strong, and then they fought back from an 8-3 deficit to tie the game. That did not happen over the weekend much at all against Arkansas.
That's the one thing is like at least your offense was a little more on par last night to where you were a little more competitive and you were scoring a higher number of runs instead of getting run ruled or something like that.
And you can win games with the way the offense hit last night. You can definitely win games.
You score 8 runs, you should be able to beat a lot of opponents.
Exactly. But it's, again, and I don't know what this would look like on a weekend because you wouldn't be throwing 12 guys, obviously. But, I mean, look, you're facing Tennessee this weekend, another loaded team with a great offense. You better hope your pitching can hold up because, look, over the last 4 games, man, they've given up nearly 50 runs, and they've surrendered 12 homers. It's insane.
This is 4 straight games surrendering 10 runs. And I have a bad feeling there's probably going to be at least 2 or 3 more games this weekend where you're probably going to surrender around 10 runs again because guess what? Tennessee hits the ball really well, too.
It's just you can't. You're not going to win a game this weekend if your pitching continues like this. You will fall flat on your face regardless of what your offense does because your pitching, as we saw last night, as soon as you got momentum in that game, it was quickly ripped away from you, of course, by a home run hit in the 8th inning there. And it was a disaster last night for this pitching staff. Nothing really more to say beyond that.
We'll get into what Coach Maneri had to say after the game. Also, and Derek and Stuart were pointing this out last night. Last night's game did take 4 hours. Also, the umpires weren't enforcing the clock rules as much as they should have. I mean, we had pitch clock violations, but the mound visits, there is a time cap on those that I feel like was not being enforced most of the night.
No, there were so many reasons why that game took so long last night. And again, it's the constant reviews, the abrupt ends with the pitch clock and stuff. It's just, let's move the game along, man. How come the MLB can do it so quick? But, college baseball, they can't get it going,
I feel like now that MLB does have the pitch clock, it makes college baseball games feel even longer because you can watch a 3-2 Major League Baseball game in about 2 hours and 20 minutes. And that same game for college baseball is going to take 3 hours and 20 minutes.
Like, who wants to watch a 4-hour midweek baseball game? And 2 good teams, but who wants to watch that, man? Not interested in that. Make it 2.5, man. That's what we need.
Absolutely. And we'll get into some of the Maneri stuff coming up next. And I was going to talk about what we were hoping this team would look like at this point in the season compared to where they're at now. It is the Extra Point, Tyler Head and Jack Beltry on your Wednesday here on The Game. And welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Ed and Jack Belcher along with you on your Wednesday, unpacking what happened with Gamecock baseball last night. A 13-8 loss to number 21 North Carolina as they slipped to 1-9 against ranked teams so far this year. Quickly, I want to remind you, coming up on Friday, it is the 107.5 Game Spring Golf Classic. This year in partnership with Lexington County Gamecock Club. Going to be hanging out there all day long. Unfortunately, all the spots have been filled. So if you already signed up, we'll see you out there. If not, then you can still, I think, come hang out, but just not participate in the golf stuff. We're going to be hanging out there with the Par 5 golf ball cannon. Also been giving away a pair of baseball and football season tickets as well. And Basketball Hall of Famer, former Gamecock great Alex English, going to be out there too and hanging out with us. Special thanks to Hardee's for providing breakfast and Firehouse subs for lunch on Friday as well. Getting into a little bit of what Coach Maneri had to say after the game. Starting off with just him talking about, as you might expect, the overall disappointment of dropping yet another one like they did last night.
Well, obviously, it was disappointing. You know, we had a great comeback there and tied the game, had the good potential go-ahead run at second base. You know, one more hit, we take the lead, and, you know, we'll see if we can hold it probably. But I only wanted to use Brandon Stone for the 9th inning today because, you know, he pitched on Friday, started that game, and you know, we need him, obviously, for this Friday, you know, whether we start him or use him out of the pen. But, you know, if we'd have taken the lead, I probably would have brought him in the 8th inning there and tried to hold the lead with him for 2 innings. But when we didn't, you know, and the game was tied, you know, the plan was to use all these different guys because we were shorthanded with Eskew being hurt, you know. And, you know, we were hoping we'd get a bunch of shutout innings for 1 inning from a bunch of different guys. Unfortunately, we only got 3 shutout innings out of 9, and you know, we come back, fight back, tie the game, and then walk the leadoff hitter on 4 pitches and in the 8th inning, and you know, you just can't do that against good teams.
You know, Jack, as I listen to Coach Maneri there, I hear the tone of his voice, and let's go back to a couple weeks ago when he got swept by Clemson, which wasn't great, but obviously close losses, and there was still that tinge of optimism and that tinge of like, hey, I know this isn't great, but don't worry. Still a lot of baseball to play. We know what we need to improve on. We'll be okay. Now you're hearing him, especially coming off of 4 straight losses and, again, sitting at a bad record in conference play through 2 series so far at 1-5. I'm not getting that reassurance out of him anymore. It's like he's even really concerned now with what he's seen and maybe worried that it's not quite as fixable as he once thought.
I mean, he should be worried. I mean, look, this is not even before the season started, man, this was never going to be a quick fix. Like, yes, they have done well against teams that they're supposed to beat. Like, that's clearly evident. They haven't lost a game against a mid-major team that they, you know, have gone up against this year. But it's hard to work with what they've got, I think, because we've said it before. I really do think, truthfully, that this team was left in an absolute mess after the previous staff was let go. And I think we're seeing a lot of, you know, typically there's cases where you have guys that aren't your players necessarily that you recruited, like Ethan Petrie, Matthew Becker, all the guys that are returning this year.
Sure.
You have some cases like in football, for instance, when Will Muschamp took over for Steve Spurrier in 2017.
Yep.
South Carolina, you know, won the Outback Bowl that year and won 9 games. So it's and a lot of those players were Spurrier guys. So it's kind of like that in a sense, except you see the opposite side of the coin here, where the results just aren't there right now. And I think that's a byproduct of the fact that the SEC is much better than South Carolina is right now.
Sure.
That's okay. That's okay to admit, because that's how it was last year and that's how it is again this year. And you got to give Paul time, I think, to fix this. I know he said in his intro press conference when he was first hired that he has a 1-year plan to win, and that's really it. And we'll see what his future looks like moving forward. I mean, who knows how long he's going to end up being here, since this is his last stop of his career. But you can't deny that the team that he has right now, it just is what it is. They're just not as good as maybe the other teams in this conference. And,
you know, if this was any other coach that was hired to replace Coach Kingston, even if it was, you know, Cliff Godwin or somebody like that, who had had moderate success at Eastern Carolina, I don't think we'd be as concerned right now because there would be that air of, well, we got to give the guy time. He's new to this place, new to the league, and all this kind of stuff. But Mainieri comes in with such a resume. And again, talked about it in the press conference, from the jump that, hey, this isn't going to be a long-term thing. We're going to turn this thing around quickly, and we expect to be in Omaha, right out of the jump and all those kind of things. So when we're in the reality of this season, I think that makes it all the more disappointing. Because, and maybe saying this team is going to be in Omaha in year number one was maybe a little bit lofty, but now we're looking at this team maybe not even making the postseason at all.
Yeah, and that would be very disappointing because I like, again, Omaha, how realistic was that really going to be, right? Only 8 teams make it there, and South Carolina hasn't been there in forever, And with this team, it's just, if they miss the postseason, I think that's a disappointment. That's a massive failure right there because that just shows you weren't even one of the 64 best teams in the country to make the tournament. That's a concern right there. And I think if you still have a chance to get there, even if you were to get swept this weekend, the schedule, I think, in my opinion, does become a little bit more favorable the rest of the way. I think, we'll see what happens with A&M and Florida. Those teams are really in a rut right now. But if South Carolina can find a way to get to about 13-ish wins like they did last year, their RPI is going to be good enough to get into the tournament. They don't even have to go 500, man, in league play. Just win enough games, maybe steal a game or two in the SEC tournament in May, and that should be enough. But that's still a long way to get there. That would require 12 more wins in SEC play to get there.
And the unfortunate thing is some of those teams that are struggling, you're playing them on the road. You're still going to have to go to Texas A&M, and again, any road game in the SEC is going to be really, really tough. And quite frankly, you're going to have to find a way to win at least one game this weekend against Tennessee. You cannot get swept again and drop to 1-8 in conference play to start things out.
Nah, that's just not going to be acceptable. This 8-game stretch that we've talked about, man, starting with Charleston, then you have series against Arkansas and Tennessee, and you have the midweek against North Carolina. You only have 1 win so far. You are 1-4 in this stretch, and to get swept would be a really, really bad look this weekend, and you lose the fan base if you do that. I mean, you can't go out of this weekend playing like you did against Arkansas, getting run ruled. I mean, it's very much possible that could happen, but you got to find a way to take a game, man.
I'm interested to see this weekend because one thing I pointed out a lot last year was even in some of the bigger series, like when Georgia came to town and stuff like that, there seemed to be a lack of energy out at Founders Park for what should have been really big series because I think the fan base didn't have that belief that Coach Kingston could get the team where they needed to be. And again, that apathy kind of lasted the entire year. There's obviously a lot of excitement with Mainieri coming in, and this, again, is a huge series. You got the number 1 team defending national champions coming to your park, and I'm not saying that people have lost faith already, but I'm interested to see what the energy level is going to be out at Founders Park this weekend because if it's pretty lax and apathetic, I wouldn't be surprised.
Mark my words, Tennessee will outdraw South Carolina.
There's going to be a lot of orange there. There's going to be a lot of orange there.
Tennessee fans will outdraw South Carolina this weekend because I don't expect, especially with women's basketball going on. And
that's true.
Softball's on the road this weekend, but yeah, man. I mean, what incentive do people have to get out to the ballpark outside of the weather will probably be nice this weekend, but
yeah.
If people do show up this weekend, man, they're going to be gone by the 5th, 6th inning because once South Carolina falls in a hole, that's the cue to get out of the ballpark, and it's disappointing to see what this program once was in terms of fan turnout and just the level of winning that they did. And I'm not saying that I expected them to win a ton in year 1. But, the way things are going right now, it's just a little disappointing to see how things have turned out.
Yeah, a rough start, obviously, in that next game against Tennessee coming up on Friday night. Coach Mainieri gave me on Carolina Calls, by the way, tomorrow night at 6 o'clock. We'll listen to right here on the game in Columbia, as well as 100.3 the game out in Myrtle Beach. We'll switch gears over to football. Mike Gundy has a bold idea for spring games. We'll hear what he had to say coming up next. It is The Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Belcher along with you on your Wednesday on the game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler and Jack along with you on your Wednesday here on the game. Navigating through spring practice, 1 week officially in the books for South Carolina. And look, we've heard from Beamer, we've heard from some of the players, heard from the coordinator, some of the assistants yesterday. Not a whole lot of news coming out of practice so far, which I would say is a good thing, question mark, maybe?
In terms of no one getting hurt or anything, yeah.
That's good. That's positive.
I would say so. And again, we'll hear from more players today, I think at 12:15. So it'll be good because, again, I think the main thing is they don't practice every single day, right?
That's true.
It's usually on and off.
I think about three practices so far.
Yeah.
Is that true?
And we'll have practice tomorrow morning at 9:43 again. So we'll get to see these guys a little bit more, hopefully. And now they're starting to go into full pads and stuff. So it's a little bit more actual stuff going on, and that'll be the case as we go through the rest of this next month here with spring football. But yeah, nothing too crazy to write home about right now, I would say.
So, of course, South Carolina seems to be one of the few programs in the country that is still having a spring game coming up. Of course, on Friday night, April the 18th, as we continue to see more schools either cancel their spring game or modify what their spring game is going to be. Auburn just the other day announced that their spring game would look more like a traditional practice. So it'll have a alumni flag football game, and then they'll have a practice that will run for basically an hour, which, again, you're allowing fans in the stands. That's still cool, but I don't know how much you're getting out of watching these guys run through drills. And I know Carolina in years past has done the little breaks during the spring game where they'll go do punt returns or do small drills and stuff like that. But watching a full-on practice is a little different.
But isn't that what the fans want, though? Because
maybe.
Because I've heard so many fans talk about how they'd love to watch practice and stuff. And I think back in the day, of course, you and I weren't here covering the team when this was going on, but I'm pretty sure Spurrier days.
You could walk up to practice anytime, apparently.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, and again, it's no different than what do they call it in the NFL when the teams the Panthers, for instance, they practice at the stadium one time and
they
all
do
the fans
a fan event,
like a fan fest type deal. So I look at it more like that. And I like the idea of the alumni flag football game. I think that is a great idea that every team should do that is not going to do a spring game.
Sure.
But I like the idea of what South Carolina is doing. And again, it's not a full-fledged game. There's still a little bit of practice in there, but I like what they're doing.
Mike Gundy, head coach of Oklahoma State, coming off of a tough season last year, has an interesting idea for his team's spring practice that involves an old rival.
Honestly, that's something that we've talked about. I think it's a great idea. I kind of forgot about it until it got brought up. Somebody had texted me an article or something about that, and when you read it, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, honestly, for us, we should do a home and home with OU in the spring. They have I think ours is on, I don't know what the date is, but it's a Saturday prior to the last week, something like that. Okay, so they should come here on the 19th, and I think theirs is earlier in the year. We should go down there and play a home and home in the spring against them. Charge $25 a head. They can use it for NIL. We'll use it for NIL. If they don't want to do two in one spring, we can do one here this year, do it there next year, and split the gate. Because we get tired of practicing against each other. It's not going to be a live game because, I don't know what Coach Venables would say, but I would be concerned with making it live just because of injury. But nobody really has live scrimmages anymore, so you make it a full thud like we're doing and practice against them just like they do in the NFL.
So he's onto something there. While I don't know if you're going to rope your rival into doing this, I do think, and we know that Colorado and Syracuse are waiting for approval from the NCAA oversight committee to do their little joint practice thing and potentially have a spring game or scrimmage between those two. I do think we're eventually going to get to the point, especially as the NCAA loses more and more power, that we're going to have South Carolina is going to have a spring session with Wake Forest. They're going to come here. We're going to go up there to Winston-Salem for 3 or 4 days. They're going to scrimmage against each other, and maybe there'll be something resembling a spring game at the end of that. I do think that's where we're heading. And again, Gundy's idea of having Bedlam in the spring maybe is a little bit extreme, but it's on kind of the right path.
I think here's the thing with Bedlam. I think I really would like to see that be an every year thing in terms of playing in the regular season, though. Like, I like the way, the Apple Cup and the Civil War, with Oregon.
Even though you can't call it Civil War anymore. It's the Oregon State game.
Yeah, that game.
You have to be
that game.
You have to be PC about it.
Yeah, that, and then Washington. Oh my gosh, and then Washington State. They all play in September now, and that's very different from when they play last week of the regular season. And they're making it work, though, even though it's a non-conference game. Oklahoma State should be doing the same thing. But in terms of like the way spring football is heading, I really do like the idea of running it like an NFL week of camp where teams come together, do joint practices, and they do that for a week, and then they play the preseason game at the end of the week. Doesn't necessarily need to be a full live scrimmage like Gundy said, but it would be cool to do something like that, like South Carolina playing, I don't know, pick a team and do that. Like you said, Wake Forest. That would be cool, and it's different from having to hit your own guys all year long. And I think that's honestly the solution compared to doing it like a preseason game in fall camp, because that's a lot tougher to execute.
You can learn a lot more, and like you said, and I think this is where all spring games are going, if they're still going to happen or not, where you're not quite resembling a full game. It's more situational type of things, to where you're not going to be saying, hey, look, Mike Gundy lost by 40 points in Bedlam in the spring. Like, that's not going to happen. But being able to say, okay, here's what I think. Here's my starting defensive line. I think it's pretty good. Let's go up against Wake Forest's starting offensive line, see how they do. Where, again, you're not going up with the same guys you've been drilling against for the past 3 weeks that know your tendencies, know exactly what you're going to do, that can kind of alter the result that you see out there. Going up against guys that don't know you, that aren't familiar with you, that you don't quite know everything about them as well, and gives you a better idea of what you have as you get towards the end of spring.
And, again, it's also just a good opportunity for, Shane's mentioned it before, Shane Beamer, that is, talking about how he's doing the spring game and all that stuff to get the freshmen and the newcomers the experience they need playing in front of a huge crowd. Imagine how many people would show up to a Saturday spring game, South Carolina playing Colorado. I know Colorado wants to do it, like you said.
Sure.
That would be so freaking cool. And even if you have to go to Boulder, man, that would be unbelievable.
And again, it wouldn't necessarily be, your 4-quarter game of saying, okay, team with the highest score wins. It would be a lot more situational, I feel like, saying, okay, and you can announce it to the stands or whatever, so people kind of know what's going on. Hey, we're going to run 2-minute drills here. Colorado's going to get the ball at the 20-yard line. They're going to try and drive down the field while the clock's running, and we're going to do the same thing for South Carolina. And again, that gives you a little bit more of a simulation of what a game looks like, as opposed to just having a practice.
And I think that is the way it needs to eventually be. Again, if you want to sell tickets, I think that's your own prerogative. The one thing I think is
people will come to it.
Yeah. Not every team, though, is probably going to be on board with this. Again, it's so many teams have already decided they don't want to have a spring game. I don't know if this would really change much, but you get the teams out there that really want to take advantage of something like this. I think it's very much possible. And we see teams like Colorado, Syracuse, South Carolina wants this too. I mean, eventually, I really do hope in a few years here, maybe even like within the next 2 years, maybe that's something we can get, because I think it would be very, very interesting and something more to look forward to compared to, it's just spring practice.
The potential of it is definitely very interesting. Speaking of interesting, the New York Giants quarterback room is very, very interesting for the 2025 season, with more to possibly add here coming up in a couple weeks with the draft. We'll tell you about that coming up next to wrap up hour number 1 of The Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Beltry along with you on your Wednesday on the game. Welcome back in. Extra Point. Tyler Ed and Jack Belcher along with you here on your Wednesday. The NFL just keeps giving us headlines. I can confidently say the New York Giants will not be one of the best teams in the NFL this year. They might be the most entertaining, though, because yesterday they added to their quarterback room Russell Wilson on a 1-year, $21 million deal after he spent 1 year with the Steelers, and that wasn't all that great. In that quarterback room already, Tommy DeVito, who's the most New York quarterback you could ever have, Jameis Winston, who was signed earlier on this week, now Russell Wilson, potentially to add a drafted quarterback soon in the next couple weeks, maybe Shedeur Sanders. Oh, boy, what a room this is.
It is going to be fascinating seeing what the season looks like. Obviously, I don't expect the Giants to be competitive at all, but I will say this: I would like to see this team on Hard Knocks. Like, I don't know if HBO has made that decision yet or not, or even in season. Like, I'd like to see during the preseason what it's like in that QB room, because Jameis Winston is a national treasure. Russell Wilson, Giants country. Let's ride. And Tommy Cutlets. I mean, and you add Shedeur Sanders to the mix. You have so many personalities in that room, and maybe even it's Cam Ward. I mean, who knows? But I'm a little bit puzzled by Russ signing. In all seriousness, though, like 1 year, $21 million, $10.5 million guaranteed. I mean, what are they getting at here, other than like just having someone be a mentor?
Well, for one, he didn't really have a lot of options.
That's true.
Again, the Steelers clearly didn't want him back, which I'm assuming that's where Aaron Rodgers is going to end up. But there weren't a lot of teams beating down his door. Like, the damage he's done to his career, and I say damage, he's obviously in the back half of his career, right? His best years behind him. He benefited from playing on some really good Seattle teams, but this thing in Denver a couple years ago, I think soured a lot of people on him, and obviously didn't do a whole lot to repair that last year in Pittsburgh. And now, again, he's a journeyman. He's going to bounce from team to team until his career's over on 1-year deals like this. Probably start some games, may have some good games where you say, hey, there's that old Russell Wilson, but probably have some bad games and some questionable decisions in those games as well. That's kind of where he's at this point.
And he's also 36 years old. Like, how many more years does he have left in the tank? And personally, I think he's kind of coming up on the end of his career here, because I mean, he didn't have a great year last year. I thought he was fine in his second year with the Broncos in 2023. Kind of a little bit underrated, I would say. But yeah, man, like, I just don't know what the ultimate move is here. Like, and again, what also happens if they do draft a quarterback? Like, who is starting on day one for that team?
Russell Wilson. I feel pretty confident saying if they draft a quarterback, Russell Wilson's still going to be your starter until they feel comfortable enough with Sanders, Ward, whoever it is, Jackson Dart, whatever, that they feel confident of handing over the reins to him. Because again, Russell Wilson is not a long-term play anymore. No. He's a stopgap at this point.
And the last thing you want, I don't see the point in signing a guy to this much money for a year. I don't even think he's worth this much at all. But you're signing him to have him be the starter, I think, this year. And I think more teams need to take that into account of when they draft a quarterback. It's okay to let them wait a year. Let them learn. For as much as people like to dog on Russ, he is experienced. He's got a Super Bowl. He's been in the league forever now, it feels like. I mean, him and Jameis, they can teach Shedeur or whoever a lot, the next quarterback that comes in. And I think it would help a guy like that to sit behind those two for a year. As much as Jameis, the gag is that he throws way too many interceptions, and then Russell's kind of just cringy and all this stuff. But I think, seriously, these new quarterback that comes in, if they draft one, can learn a lot from these two guys. Even not really Tommy DeVito, because let's be real. Tommy's more of just he's not even much older than what
Tommy's your extra arm.
He's just in the room. Yeah, he's a guy that's probably going to get cut, honestly, at the because you're not going to carry 4 quarterbacks.
No, you shouldn't.
No, so go ahead.
Who leads the pregame motivation speech, Jameis or Russell, or are they fighting over it?
Oh, Jameis, easily. Jameis. They're both so different, though, because you can't take Jameis seriously half the time. But some of the things he says, it's like, I'll buy into it more than a Russell. But Russell seems a little bit more serious.
That's the thing, is I feel like Jameis Winston understands he's goofy. Russell Wilson doesn't understand that he's a goofball, right?
Nah, no. He doesn't get that he's a meme. But hey, Jameis embraces it.
Good luck, Giants. That'll do for hour number 1 of the Extra Point. Coming next, hour number 2. Myself, Jay Tart, will dive back in to March Madness. Coming up next here on the game. Tyler Head once again telling you about our friends over at Twin Peaks. And it is still the month of March. That means there's a lot of basketball left to be played, including tomorrow when that third round gets underway. And you know there's no better place to park yourself in the month of March than with our friends over at Twin Peaks right down the street from us here in the Vista. If you haven't been there already, we were out there the other day for the beginning of the tournament. TVs literally as far as the eye can see. You cannot turn anywhere in Twin Peaks without seeing a television. In addition to that, they have amazing food as well. And don't forget about those 29-degree draft beers and extensive collection of bourbons and whiskeys and cocktails and anything that you can imagine that you want to be drinking while watching your basketball. Again, your ultimate destination for all basketball in the month of March and every sport year-round is with our friends at Twin Peaks in the Vista. 10 o'clock. Welcome back in. Hour number 2. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you. Jalen Tart hanging out as he does each and every Wednesday. Continuing the reputation of bomb shirts from, I'm assuming, the 90s. What are we rocking today, Jalen?
Whitney Houston.
Nice.
Whitney Houston today.
Did you also get that from Goodwill?
No, Plato's Closet.
Okay.
Plato's Closet. They have really good stuff.
But still like a secondhand store.
Yeah.
Where, like, again, somebody found that in the back of their closet from 95 and decided to give it away. Or I guess if you go to Plato's, you can sell it to Plato's.
Well, no, not Plato's Closet, but Plato's Closet is good. Marshall's.
Okay. All right.
Marshall's and Ross are really good stores to sell.
So it was new then.
Yeah.
It's just like vintage T-shirt.
Like $8.99.
Oh, duh.
Yeah.
You have to, right?
Yeah.
You can't walk past that. Was it like calling out to you like?
Yeah, because I love Whitney Houston.
Who doesn't?
Yeah. Watched all the Lifetime documentaries growing up, and so I was like, let me just get this. It looked nice, so I was like, okay.
Yeah.
So
see, that's your reputation now. Is you got to wear some kind of cool throwback shirt because you had TLC the other week, got Whitney Houston now.
I need to start wearing sports people now.
I mean, you can.
I need to find some sports legends from who I like that will resonate with everyone.
What kind of T-shirts would that be? What are your sports legends that you'd rock?
Marvin Harrison.
Okay.
Marvin Harrison is one. I need a Michael Jordan. I need an Asia Wilson.
Sure.
I need
sure,
Dawn
you can find
Staley.
Asia Wilson pretty
Dawn
easy
Staley
here.
would be really nice. But
do they sell specific Dawn Staley shirts?
I don't know.
I mean, I know you can go.
I've been looking for a Jay-Z one for the longest.
Okay.
I've not found one yet.
All right.
So he is my all-time favorite rapper. I love Jay-Z.
Okay.
So,
I'm sure. I mean, you can probably find them online, right?
Yeah. It's just hard to find really good materialistic.
There is a charm to finding it yourself in a store when you're not looking for it and like being able to physically hold it before you buy it. I get that.
Anyway, these games this weekend was ridiculous.
It has been a interesting month of March, and we'll kind of split this between men's and women's. Starting off with the women's, where like the women's tournament is very chalk. Right, like we've talked about it already a lot this week. There's not a lot of upsets. The lowest seed to ever win the thing was LSU at number 3 a couple years ago. So you kind of have what you expect. I think we got treated to the most insane game of the tournament so far with Maryland and Alabama the other night playing for the right to take on South Carolina this weekend in the Sweet 16.
I'll say Sarah Ashley Barker is going to be a steal if she declares to go to the W. The way that she flat out can score the basketball in many different ways is just incredible.
Yeah.
But the way that Maryland was able to hang in there after Alabama went on that run late in the third and fourth quarter, they're going to be good. Cheyenne Sellers is really good. Smile is really good. Their point guard is really good too. I just think, it's going to be an interesting Sweet 16 with the amount of teams. The 5 seeds has been the talk of the town for the last week. Ole Miss and Tennessee getting in the way that they did. It's going to be very interesting to see those teams, Maryland, Ole Miss, and Tennessee go far. Shout out to USC. A lot of the community and the basketball world is reaching out to Juju with her tearing her ACL. Very gruesome injury. I saw that live, and as soon as I saw her facial reaction holding her leg, I was like, yep, it's over. They could still go to the Final Four. Don't get me wrong, but it's just going to be different without Juju now.
Sure, they are talented enough to still make a deep run in this thing, but there's always going to be that element of, man, if only Juju was out there. And even, let's say, if South Carolina were to match up with them in the national championship game and South Carolina were to win, well, then, what's everybody going to say? Well, if Juju Watkins played, it's a different story. And the unfortunate thing about an injury like an ACL is, South Carolina is going to be taking them on at the beginning of next season early on. I can't remember if it's in California or Greenville this year.
It's at Crypto this year.
Crypto this year in Greenville.
And Bon Secours.
But regardless, you're going to see them early on next season. I don't know if Juju Watson's going to be recovered and healthy enough by then.
I think the smart move is just to not play her to start the season. I mean, that is a 9-month to a year-long recovery.
Yep.
Get her as healthy as she can. so that way she can be ready for the conference play, then go into the tournament. She'll be 100% ready to go.
Yeah,
She'll be fine.
so you theoretically might have to wait potentially another calendar year before you get that matchup. Because that's the thing is, and Carolina has beaten tons of phenomenal talents on the way to many national championships they've had so far. And Juju Watkins is the one they haven't really crossed paths with specifically this season. You've seen Lauren Betts. You've seen Madison Booker. You've seen Paige Beckers. You've seen Haley Van Lith. Like, Juju Watkins is that one, like, hey, we've not seen her square off against South Carolina, and you'd love to see that matchup. Because, again, nobody wants to, not saying that South Carolina will be backdooring their way in, nobody wants to beat a team that has that excuse.
Yeah.
They're like, well, if our best player was out here, it would be a different story. You know, it drives LSU crazy that they didn't beat South Carolina 2 years ago to win the national championship because Iowa beat South Carolina first in the Final Four. So you obviously want to beat the best team with their best player if it comes down to that.
And the talk of the town of leading up to this matchup beforehand was we wanted to see Juju Watkins go up against the mighty South Carolina. That has been the standard of women's basketball for so many years. Now it's like this injury happened, and it's like we not be able to get to see that. You know, it's unfortunate that things like that happen, but injuries do happen in basketball. It's very unexpected.
And hey, look, South Carolina lost Ashlyn Watkins.
Yeah,
you know, a couple months ago.
The exact same.
So that's a huge deal.
I mean, if she does come back before November and plays lights out 100%, I would be very impressed with the recovery that she's been able to, you know, close the gap on, because this injury, you know, again, it's a 9-month to a 1-year injury, but there are other, you know, things that we could get to with just USC. But how about the Sweet 16, Duke and North Carolina playing again for the third time in a row in this season? You have Texas and Tennessee in the Sweet 16. Like, Oklahoma and UConn is the interesting matchup that I'm looking forward to.
Good luck, Oklahoma. I don't think UConn's losing that game.
I mean, the only thing with it, Oklahoma's pace of play is number 1 in the country. UConn doesn't really play that quick. And then you have Reagan Beers versus Sarah Strong, one of the 2 best post players in the country. I'm interested to see that. LSU playing NC State.
Mm-hmm. Good.
That will be entertaining. That would be entertaining.
And that's the thing where, you know, the women's tournament is not as exciting as the men's in the first couple rounds because you just don't really see upsets all that often. But when you get into the Sweet 16, Elite 8, Final Four, obviously, you just get star matchups. You get high-caliber competition going head-to-head pretty much each and every game. And South Carolina is going to have, you know, a obviously very gritty, very resilient team in Maryland who was down by 17 in the third quarter of that game against Alabama the other day, clawed their way back, took it to double overtime, and obviously won. Now, Carolina, a very heavy favorite at 17.5 points going to that matchup. Obviously, Maryland had one less day of rest because they played on Monday, and they played an additional 10 minutes of basketball with a double overtime, so they're coming into that game with a little bit of a disadvantage. But again, they're scrappy. You never know what can happen.
Yeah, they're scrappy. Cheyenne Sellers, the heart and soul of that Maryland Terrapin team that go against South Carolina. I'm just interested to see what the outcome of this North Carolina Duke game is going to be like, because the regular season, Duke was playing it close with South Carolina, and now this is a neutral site game now. It could be different. Duke is a different team. They played a really, really good ACC tournament. They played really well at home the first 2 rounds. I mean, anything can happen, but a lot of good games for the Sweet 16 this weekend.
And we obviously know that South Carolina is likely going to be favored in pretty much every single matchup they have going forward, save for maybe a national championship game or something like that. But as we've seen this year, they've lost 3 times already. So losing would not be like the, oh, my God, I can't believe this, the world is ending type of thing, because we've seen this team be flawed at times this year. However, they look like they've been playing their best basketball here as of late. Obviously, they were down to Indiana at halftime on Sunday, but put on phenomenal performance in the second half and were able to pick up a pretty comfortable victory there after slaughtering Tennessee Tech in the first round. So, you know, I feel like South Carolina's got the opportunity to go through and run through these games. I don't want to say easily, but kind of routinely like we expect them to be. But, again, as you get into matching up with potentially a Duke, as you potentially take on, you know, a Texas or whatever later on these rounds, you do have, you know, some tough matchups there.
And I think, you know, the games are not going to – what we saw with the Indiana game is kind of what the tone is going to be like for the rest of the tournament going forward. For the Gamecocks, playing a Texas 3 times in a row, or Tennessee twice, That's not an easy task. I think the winner of, the Notre Dame TCU is interesting because they both have really star players in Olivia Miles, Hannah Hidalgo, Haley Van Lith, and Sedona Prince going up against each other. I just think for TCU, they have more of a better size advantage than Notre Dame, but Notre Dame is really efficient shooting the ball. I have TCU there. Texas and Tennessee. I think Tennessee, with their length of how they defend and their post presence, could bother Texas, but with Texas scoring the ball very efficiently, I don't know how that's going to factor because we've seen Texas in a neutral site game early in the SEC tournament, and they have not really played well leading up to their championship game. So I don't know. I think Tennessee could be on an upset alert there. I have Tennessee there. Duke to me is one of the underrated teams. I have Duke, and then I have South Carolina beating Maryland, and that's my Elite Eight right there.
Okay, and again, we'll see what happens this upcoming weekend with those matchups. Again, you have Juju Watkins. That would you say she was the biggest star in women's basketball this year? Because again, Caitlin Clark moved on. Angel Reese moved on a year ago, and they were undoubtedly number one and number two when it came to popularity and name recognition within women's basketball over the past couple of years. Juju Watkins was probably that one for this season, and now she's obviously been lost.
Yes. Between her and Hannah Hidalgo, Juju Watkins was the one. She is the face of women's college basketball right now.
I would probably have put Paige Beckers as number 2.
Yeah.
And she now probably assumes that number 1 role. As of right now, Hidalgo, obviously very popular. Again, Madison Booker, Lauren Betts, obviously very, very big names as well. And the women's game, the uniqueness of it, because you don't have one and dones, and the transfer portal isn't as rampant in that as it is in men's basketball. You have the ability for these women to stay at one place for a couple years, to build that reputation, build that rapport, and become more household names like Caitlin Clark, like Angel Reese, like Aaliyah Boston did when she was here at South Carolina. Angel Reese, going back a few years back, to where you do have star power, where, again, you have names in the men's tournament, which we'll get to in a moment, but they're not as prevalent as you have in the women's tournament.
They're not. And, there are household names, Aja Wilson, Jewel Lloyd, Skylar Diggins-Smith, Rebecca Lobo, Diana Taurasi. Like, each dynasty team, I should say, has a household name in their respective, whatever they have going on. But my thing is, it's going to continue. There are going to be more stars coming. Yesterday, Aaliyah Chavez committed to Oklahoma, and that caused a lot of interesting points being made because it was rumored that she was going to Texas. It was advertised that she was going to Texas. She chose to go to Oklahoma, so now it's looking like. And the interesting fact here is she's from Lubbock. Trae Young is from Lubbock, and he's a household name at Oklahoma. So I'm interested to see how this would play out for Oklahoma, but they're going to be a top contender in the SEC if they continue on past the Elite Eight and go into the Final Four. They're automatically going to be a top contender with getting Aaliyah Chavez.
We'll talk a little bit about the men's tournament as they get set to roll the Sweet 16 coming up tomorrow, and the SEC having almost half the field being occupied by their teams. That's coming up next. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jalen Tart along with you on your Wednesday here on The Game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Ed, Jalen Tart hanging out with you on your Wednesday here on the game, talking some NCAA hoops as we are in the midst of March Madness. The men's Sweet 16 gets rolling coming up tomorrow as we've got 2 rounds in the books so far. Are you somebody, by the way, how's your bracket doing, first of all? First question.
Texas A&M ruined it for me. The
Okay.
first, so yeah, I picked Drake, and they lost, and I was like, yep.
See, I had Drake going actually pretty deep. They got me one win.
I did too. I was like, nope.
I had Drake, VCU.
I had Arkansas right.
Yeah.
I had Arkansas in the Sweet 16, so I was very happy about that. So I was like, okay, cool.
Well, they're the lone Cinderella. If you want
Yeah.
to call them that. They are a double-digit seed.
Yeah.
One common gripe I've seen, and these are, look, the NCAA tournament invites a lot of eyes that don't watch college basketball from November to the end of February. They tune in for the madness of the month, to see the chaos, and that's all they really care about. And a lot of people have been complaining coming away from the weekend that the tournament's been boring so far. There haven't been crazy upsets, and yeah, you've had some 12s and some 11s win some games. Obviously, Arkansas getting to where they are at a 10 at this point in time, but you didn't have a 15 beating a 2 or a 14 beating a 3 or something like that we've seen prevalently over the past couple of years. And there's discussions, the Steve Naismiths of the world of, oh, it's dead, the tournament's dead because Cinderellas aren't going to happen anymore and all that kind of stuff. Let's calm down here a little bit. Let's pump the brakes.
Well, it might get worse because now, like, the best teams on these mid-major teams, they're more likely going into the portal to want to go to a bigger school. So it's like...
And there is a point to that, but I need to see it consistently year to year. Because, look, last year, Yale at 14 beat Auburn. You know what I mean? We had Oakland at 15 beat Kentucky. So we just saw these things happen a year ago. Because they didn't happen this year doesn't mean, in my opinion, that they're suddenly going to go away. We'll have to see. If it happens over the course of a 3-year period, then I think I'm a little more comfortable saying, okay, something's definitely changed here. But despite all the complaining, the men's basketball tournament is averaging 9.4 million viewers, making it the best figure through the second round since 1993. It's up 3% from last year. Sunday alone was 10.1 million viewers, led by Duke and Baylor, Kentucky and Illinois, and Florida and UConn. So despite the fact that it's not the most exciting tournament, quote unquote, people still watching.
I liked it. I like it so far. Even the one game when Calipari beat Bill Self, and we knew that we were going to get Calipari and Patino.
Because we were all rooting for that, right? We all wanted to see it.
We said that last week that either Self or Calipari. I picked Calipari last week, and then seeing that, it was ridiculous. I just turned the TV on, and it was just like everybody was watching it. Twitter was going crazy over this. Then the buzzer beater shot from Derek Queen. My God. Mm-hmm. The way that he introduced himself to the college basketball world is really impressive. Michigan going on this run that they're going on. The Fab Five, everybody is talking about Michigan. Florida beating UConn and the controversy of Dan Hurley. Like the storylines of what's been going on in this tournament is driving the viewership.
That is a really good point because I think a lot of people focus every March on the storylines of the Cinderellas. Again, it's a team that you've never heard of, a player that you never heard of, going off, beating some highly ranked team or some highly seeded team, and that's kind of what we like to follow. There's tons of stories baked into what we have. It's just with the usual suspects. Again, it's Calipari. It is UConn. It is Duke. It is Auburn. Like these teams that we already know a lot about, and that doesn't necessarily make it less exciting. It's just a little bit different than what we're used to.
Then also, too, it's tied into the women's games because you have Tennessee, you have Maryland that's still in, Duke is still in. I mean, it's all these different things. Now, the biggest takeaway now is, can Calipari make it to the Final Four with this underdog Arkansas team? I don't know. I mean,
are they underdogs, though? Because they're very talented. I just feel like they weren't playing up to their potential for a lot of the season. Look, we saw them get road graded here at Colonial Life Arena only a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
But they've been playing better basketball since then. I just think they're finally playing up to their potential. I wouldn't call them an underdog.
I think they were dealing with a lot of roadblocks with Flan going out at the early part of the season. Their leading scorer and rebounder was out for the majority of conference play. I think now Calipari has figured out a way to bring this team together, and then he said that the cause of that was his freshmen, and we saw that in the St. John's game. They're playing really, really good team basketball, but it's going to be a very interesting Sweet 16 for the men's side as well as the women. I mean, this tournament, with what we've saw with the unexpected events, I really liked what the outcome of this tournament and, what is going to happen this weekend. I really don't know who is going to, for the men specifically, I don't know who's going to win.
Yeah,
I just don't know.
And then that's what makes it fun. Because, again, you've got an Auburn team that finally got past the second round for the first time since their Final Four run.
Yeah.
Duke is obviously doing what Duke does, but Cooper Flagg, is not likely 100%, but still playing really well. And you just have so many stories going on here. And that's what makes it fun. Again, we come in here to talk about things. We like stories. We like content to be able to talk about. And this tournament's given us a lot of that.
How about Kentucky making it this far without Calipari? Now they're playing Tennessee in the Sweet 16. This, it's just, I don't know. And I'll say this too. I think the SEC is only going to get better because with them having this many teams, but the amount of teams that they have representing in the Sweet 16 going on into the Elite Eight is just beyond impressive. It's just ridiculous.
In my opinion, though, you still need to get at least one team in the national championship to justify, because again, we've built this up to be the best conference in the history of college basketball for a single season. You got a record number of teams into the tournament. You've now got a record number of teams in the Sweet 16, and if you get one team in the Final Four and that team gets bounced and doesn't make the national championship, I consider that a disappointment.
Who do you think that will be?
To make the national championship, to me, it's Auburn. I think Auburn has the best potential if they continue to play up to it. And again, we've seen in the past couple of years, Bruce Pearl has faltered when he gets into the tournament.
Yeah.
They've gotten past the hump of the second round. I think they're the most talented team from the SEC. I think they have the best chance. Again, Florida very good, and could Florida unseat them? Certainly. But if I'm putting my money on one team, it's Auburn.
And I don't know. The Maryland game is going to be interesting for Florida as well. Kentucky and Tennessee, I think the winner of that game could go to the Final Four if they can beat. Now, they have to get past Houston. Houston is really good. Houston is talentedly good. But I'm excited. I'm excited. I like the moments that we've seen so far. But for me, it was Calipari beating Pitino. Hands down, it was him beating Pitino.
That is, I don't know if that's necessarily a moment because it's an entire game, which did have a lot of build-up to it.
Pitino sat down his best player.
He did.
That was interesting.
Yep.
And for the last 5 minutes of the game, him shooting, 3 for 17 from the field?
Yep. No, they're shooting that entire game was just atrocious.
And then what he said afterwards was a whole story in itself that, he knew that he blasted the reporter. He kind of pushed away the reporter with him asking the question of, what was the reason? What happened? But I think the shot of the game was Derek Queen by far.
Yeah, it's the one true buzzer beater we've gotten so far.
Because if Colorado State wins, the storyline could be different where Colorado State is the true Cinderella over Arkansas.
They would be the lowest seed at 12 and the only 12 seed to get this far. So, yeah, that would have been quite a story if they got that far. But, yeah, the Queen buzzer beater is the biggest, I'd say, single moment so far. Again, we've had a lot of good games. Like UConn and Florida the other day was a good heavyweight fight. Again, for the highlight fans, right? The people that like to watch the March Madness compilations on YouTube to get themselves hyped up. We haven't had as many of those kind of things happen just yet.
Who is your dark horse?
Dark horse. It's a good question.
Texas Tech is interesting. For them to be seated that high, I've saw them play once in the tournament. They look so balanced. They just look so. Their post play is really good. Duke and Arizona would be interesting. Caleb Love's last dance in the tournament. He's still going. But aside from the teams, it's been a lot of coaching changes as well. That's been going on as well.
Yeah.
The McNeese coach, he's going to NC State.
Yeah, Will Wade, which we knew that going into the tournament, which was interesting. That was another storyline last week is, okay, he's coaching, but we know he's leaving as soon as they're out.
Yeah.
So
It's just been a lot of going on.
Yeah, and it's been fun. I've enjoyed it, and I
Me
think
too.
it's going to continue to be fun. And that means the fact that you don't have any Cinderella still alive means you've got high-quality basketball teams in your final 16, which means the next 4 rounds should be really good.
So you're calling Duke and Auburn the national championship?
That's what. Well, I had Duke in my national championship against St. John's, but St. John's is out now, so I'm going to continue to ride with Duke, and I think they'll win the national championship. But yeah, give me Auburn to get there.
Okay. I'll take Duke and Auburn. It's either Duke and Auburn or Duke and Florida.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens as the Sweet 16 gets rolling tomorrow. Quick detour from the basketball court coming up next. We talk some racing when Jen Jensen was to do each and every Wednesday here on the X Point. Tyler Head and Jalen Tart along with you here on the game.
Larson about to become the third winningest driver for Hendrick Motorsports, behind Jeff Gordon and Jimmy Johnson. 2/3 of the clean sweep for the weekend, and coming around turn 4 for his 30th career win, Kyle Larson for Hendrick Motorsports and Chevrolet wins in Homestead.
Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you here on your Wednesday on the game. That was the call on Sunday afternoon at Homestead Miami Speedway as Kyle Larson picks up the victory in the Straight Talk Wireless 400 for his first victory of the 2025 season. Joining me to talk some racing as she does each and every Wednesday is Jen Jentz from the early game. And Jen, you come in right at our Who Sprung a Leak segment brought to you by our friends over at American Leak Detection. I would say Larson's teammate Alex Bowman, who looked maybe on his way to winning his first race of the season, ends up scraping the wall up in turn 4, allowing an opportunity for Larson to squeak by and pick up the win. Now, obviously, you still had a 1-2 finish for Hendrick Motorsports, but, man, that one's going to be eating Bowman alive for a while.
Oh, yeah, he's going to have a hard time. He's commented on that a couple times where it's like, I just gave it away, and that's what happens. And it's almost kind of reminiscent of what's been happening with Kyle Larson there. It just seems like there's always just some kind of a mistake that's kept him out of victory lane, except for I think like one time. So, Bowman's going to feel that for a while.
Well, still Hendrick Motorsports victory regardless, and you heard Mike Joy reference it there in calling Larson's victory. 30th career win. He's now won 24 races at Hendrick Motorsports in just over 4 years, which included the 2021 championship and 10 wins that season. I mean, look, Larson's been billed as one of the best talents in the entire world when it comes to racing, and really once he got into Hendrick Motorsports, he's been able to flex that muscle a lot since then.
Yeah, Hendrick has definitely helped him. I mean, but clearly he is just a natural talent. You put him behind the wheel of anything, he could probably wheel a dump truck and win a race. He just has that much talent in so many different disciplines, and I think Hendrick has just been such a blessing for him.
Well, and I jumped on the Larson train back when he was at Ganassi, even before he started winning actual races, because you could see that he was getting more out of equipment than what it should have been. Because, again, Ganassi was probably, B- equipment compared to what Hendrick is, which is A+.
Yeah.
And he was able to run well, came close to winning so many times, finally broke through and started winning races, and had 6 wins in 6 years there. And, again, once he finally got into top-level stuff, he's been winning pretty much nonstop.
Yeah, you look at the numbers of, those in front of him. Jimmy Johnson has 83 wins, I think, with Hendrick, and then I read 93 or something with Jeff Gordon.
Yep.
So he has a ways to go, but he's a young guy, so he's definitely has an opportunity for longevity with Hendrick, and I could see him getting somewhere close to those numbers.
He's definitely going to get over 50. I feel confident in saying that he's going to get that in the next handful of years. Once you get past that, especially as you creep up on 40 and you start to slow down a little bit, who knows what can happen. But he's truly racing up to his form that we've known he's always been able to, and as a fan, it's exciting to see.
It really is, and he's just, you just like him. He's just a good guy. He's a family man, taking a selfie by the trophy with one of his sons, and usually it takes a lot to ruffle his feathers. He's usually pretty calm, just does his thing. He can get fired up, but it kind of takes a lot. So he's just a good representative for the sport in general.
Well, he was certainly happy walking out of Homestead Miami Speedway on Sunday. Ryan Blaney, on the other hand, not quite. After he dominated and led over half the race, 124 laps or almost half the race, 124 laps on Sunday. Engine grenades in the final couple of laps as he looks to be in position, potentially make a run at the front once again. Third straight finish of 28th or worse after having his engine go at Phoenix, crashing at Las Vegas last week. For somebody that has the speed to run up front, the results are not showing for it right now for Ryan Blaney.
No, talk about feeling like you just are just having a series of bad luck. And of course, I take it personally because that's who I picked for our picks in the morning. So I know. I was like, okay, I've got this. This will be great. And then I see his engine blow. It's like, seriously? But, no, and bless him. He's had the speed and obviously the talent and all of that, but the car's been good for some reason. So I hope they're going to work and checking on, like, what's going on because he hasn't had a lot of engine failures, and to have two within the first 6 races of the season, that's craziness.
And especially in today's NASCAR, where the engines are built so well and obviously aren't producing their max output when it comes to horsepower, we don't see blown engines a lot. and especially one that just goes off like a bomb did on Sunday where you see the big plume of smoke. That's very rare in today's world, especially with what we know to be Penske and Roush Yates engines, which are usually built pretty well.
Absolutely, and it didn't sound like there was anything that was giving him any indications, like he wasn't dropping any gears, he wasn't having any issues of any kind, and then just boom out of the blue. So I'm sure, going to be a lot of investigating going on and trying to recreate what happened.
Well, fortunately for him, they head to Martinsville this weekend, where he has won the past couple of years in the playoffs to obviously put him in position to race for the championship in both years, so potentially a chance for him to get back on track this weekend. Speaking of the championship, by the way, a lot of rumors floating around that Homestead could get the championship race returning in 2026. Don't have any official announcement on this, but I think most people in the NASCAR fan base would welcome this return.
Oh, it's such a great – I mean, there's not really one manufacturer that just dominates there. It's not like Denny Hamlin has won 6 out of 8 races there. Like, it seems to be – sort of just a very universal track, and it's such great racing there. And so I wouldn't disagree with putting it back there. I did read something that there may be a lot of other events going on down there maybe next year. So there was talk that even of rotating, like maybe they have a finale in Vegas or something. I don't know. Have you heard anything about any of that?
I've seen some stuff about the rotation that Vegas could possibly get it in 2027. And look, we know the championship structure is going to change next year. And look, I would be in the camp of not having a winner-take-all Final Four. But if you were still to do that, rotating tracks, I think, is the smartest thing. Because, again, Penske's clearly got Phoenix figured out, right? Like, they've won all 3 next-gen championships and likely could win this year as well just because they have it on lock down there for whatever reason. So rotating the championship race and putting it at a place – because, look, with the next-gen car, the mile and a half is the best product that they have. They put on the best show at those type of tracks. We've seen that at Vegas and Homestead these past 2 weeks. Why not put your championship race at a track that's going to give you the best possible racing? Look, Phoenix is fine, but it can be a little dull at times. And having your best race, the biggest race the entire year, end on kind of anticlimactically is obviously not what you want.
No, it's not. And I know that they also have to try to appeal to the fan base. And I know there were a lot of investments that were put into Phoenix to make it just a fabulous place, and the infield and all that. But, resources can be put into the grounds and everything at Homestead and make that just as appealing. So I think that there's certainly options that they can invest in to make that good. But I'm kind of with you. I almost am kind of interested in perhaps doing some type of a rotating, because then it keeps everybody not getting complacent, but they have the opportunity to really test all of the different teams, test all the manufacturers, and not just make it very one-dimensional, I guess.
Well, it should be an exciting weekend this upcoming weekend at Martinsville, and this time next week, Jen, we'll finally be previewing Throwback Weekend at Darlington.
I'm just so stunned about that. I'm excited.
Can't wait for it, and we'll talk to you next week.
Sounds great. Thanks, Tyler. It
is the Extra Point. She's Jen Jensen from the early game. Tyler Head along with you. We'll come back and wrap up hour number 2. Have you seen the morning routine video that's gone viral on Twitter? Well, South Carolina football has given their own version. We'll weigh in on that coming up next to wrap up hour number 2 here on The Game. And welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jalen Tart hanging out with you on your Wednesday. You got a morning routine, Jalen? Anything that you do each and every day to get yourself ready for the day?
My morning routine is like that by Future with what just played over the air. But anyway, I don't. Well, it's not an odd morning routine. I just, I get up, wash my face, brush my teeth.
Pretty normal.
Sometimes I shower. Sometimes, I will shower the night before.
Yeah.
Go to the gym.
I'd say that's pretty normal for most people.
Yeah.
If you've been on any social media platform this past weekend, you probably saw the viral. His name's Ashton Hall. He's an influencer. You can follow him on Instagram. He's got like 10 million followers. Doing his ridiculous morning routine where he gets up at like 3:30. He does like push-ups on his patio, on his like balcony. He dunks his face in ice water like 5 times.
That was like,
he rubs a banana peel on his face. Yeah. It's all insane.
I saw that and I was just like, what? I'm like, who influenced you to do that?
Wait, here's my thing. And I was talking to Terry about this in the last break there. I feel like, especially with a lot of these influencers that have a lot of followers, they know what they're doing, right? They're going to put out a ridiculous piece of content that's going to get people to watch, get people to follow them, and get people to engage with the content.
Yeah.
So I doubt that's his actual morning routine, but he knows putting something ridiculous out there is going to turn into a bunch of memes, which it has, and going to have people talking about him and that content for a long time.
And, I mean, it looked ridiculous, and he's got people talking now, but that's just something that I would not be comfortable in doing. When I saw it, I'm thinking he works out. Like, he's just a person that works out and trains people.
Yeah, and I think he is I don't follow him, but I think he's some kind of trainer. Again, he's got the physique to back that up.
And, I mean, I get the meditation.
Sure.
Sometimes I do that as well. But putting your face in a bucket or a bowl full of ice and water.
Not just water. It is expensive Santiago or Saratoga, whatever it's called, the expensive bottled water. It's not like tap water. He's getting like purified, expensive water to dunk his face in. And I bring this up because obviously this goes viral. It's a huge meme. It's gotten to Gamecock football now. Because yesterday before practice, they put out a bowl of ice water and banana peels on a table and had players walk by and do basically what Ashton Hall was doing. And it's funny to me because, and I know you weren't doing this with us a year ago, but you obviously remember coming off the 5-7 season from 2023, a lot of the negative energy around the program. And anytime, and look, Gamecock football has a really good social media team.
They're really good.
They're really good. They did the Sopranos video at the beginning of, I think, last year. That was really cool.
Yeah.
They do a lot of good stuff. And last year, it was funny, in the offseason, every time they posted something, it was negative comments. Stop posting stupid videos, focus on football. Because, again, you went 5-7 the year before. And, again, Coach Beamer's not making these videos. You know what I mean? But that's how people react. And this year, coming off of a 9-win season, everybody's like, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen. I love this so much. This team is so cool and so neat. It's so funny how quickly that narrative can shift based on the season that you had. Because, again, the video doesn't really distract from what you're doing in practice. It's a fun thing they're doing for 2 seconds on the way out of the field. But in people's minds, if you're doing that instead of focusing on football, you're going to make yourself worse. And coming off of a bad season, that's bad optics.
And every day, fans will love you and fans will hate you all in the same breath. But I remember where Shane did the Soldier Boy, Soldier Boy trend
a couple years ago,
and that's when I was like, okay, he is a people's cult. He knows the cult, like he knows what's going on.
He had not seen this video because in the post they put up yesterday, he's like, what are you guys doing?
Yeah.
I rubbed the banana peel in my face. What's happening? So he's not completely in the loop on everything, but the Soldier Boy video, the other stuff that you've seen him do, he likes to embrace what his players are interested in.
But then later in the video, he went ahead and went with the trend, even though he didn't know what was going on.
He did. He had his hat on. It was funny.
I was like, okay. But I like that he is having fun with his players, and that's the type of culture that would, that players love to be around, is that you got to be able to have fun with them.
And I know it's crazy for people our age or older to think that a video like that could really change someone's opinion of Coach Beamer, but imagine you're a 17-year-old kid, right? You're deciding where you're going to go to college, and
Yeah.
you've watched that video and laughed at it a million times from the influencer over the weekend. You see Shane Beamer leaning into it and embracing it. Like, again, that's not going to be your final decision on why you come to South Carolina, but that can certainly influence why you might take a liking to Coach Beamer.
Right. And, you would see that type of stuff, too. Like, we may not see it during the season, but he knows how to build a bond with not just only his players, but his staff and with the community as well. So for them to put out something like this with, them having a historic season that they did last year, it's only going to give them, and then the spring game is right around the corner as well. It's kind of giving fans hyped up about what they could potentially see come the spring game, football game.
I still don't know what the properties of wiping a banana peel on your face are supposed to do.
I don't get that. No, I'm not doing that.
So, again, if you hadn't seen the video, hop on Twitter. You can check it out. And Getting Gamecock Football has their own version. Jalen, we'll see you next week.
Awesome, man. Enjoy the games this weekend.
Coming up next, Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on The Game.
Peace out, y'all.
At 11 o'clock, welcome in. It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West, Chris, along with you on your Wednesday here on The Game. Chris and I were talking about this before the show started. I think summer's come early to our studio. It's a little toasty in here. I think hopefully we've turned it down. Again, hey, listen, we're talking about indoor temperature here.
Yep.
It's a little different than being outside. It's not supposed to be this warm inside, typically.
Okay. I think I figured out how to turn the air on.
Well, I thought we figured it out yesterday, and then it's back up to being warm again today.
Somebody messed with it. We'll see. So, yeah, I had that same thought because yesterday I complained, and then Wes didn't give me a look, but now we got to be careful here.
Which, again,
back to back.
It's not normally 80 degrees inside of places in buildings.
Are we?
That is abnormal.
I need a ruling real quick, too, though. Not temperature. Are we allowed to complain about the pollen?
Okay, Wes,
within reason.
What's the reason? What's the line?
Well, I mean, like once, guys, the pollen's crazy. But once you have brought it up maybe 3 or 4 times, then we got to draw a line somewhere, I think.
All right. Now, are you affected by the pollen like everybody else? Or is it not?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody's affected by the pollen.
Some people worse than others.
Mine's bad right now. I just talked to Dreamy Josh, too, on the phone coming in. He's affected.
Yeah.
He's struggling.
Sounded awful. Is that what you're trying to say?
He had...
You can hear the drainage?
Yeah, he had, like, clothespin nose sound going. Yeah, it was rough.
Terry sounds the same way.
Yeah, he does. I just talked to him, too. We're all struggling. I just wanted to make sure.
What are y'all scheming?
Taking over the world.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I say, well, yeah, we're not looped into this. What's going on?
I just saw Terry. I called Josh and guilted him for not hitting me up in a long time.
Oh, there you go. Sure. He didn't even come out of Firehouse last week.
I know.
There was food.
It's bad. We'll get him next time.
He called me yesterday, so I don't know what y'all are talking about.
Oh,
should I be expecting a call today? Well, no, actually, he did text me about tickets, which I have to give away in a little bit. So I guess we have had communication. So
what are we giving away?
Baseball tickets. I don't know if that's exciting people right now because last night up in Charlotte, another loss, 4th in a row. Obviously 1-9 against ranked teams as Carolina loses 13-8 to North Carolina. Another game where you're in the 8th inning, tie ball game, and then the wheels come off, and you again suffer yet another tough pill to swallow in a loss to a North Carolina team that was ranked number 21 last night.
Yeah, I mean, not for the lack of fight. Like, this is a team that battled back. I'll be completely honest. I thought the game was pretty much over already, and it was 8-3, and you start chipping away, you get a couple base runners, a walk here, a hit there. Kazmar has a big hit for you, almost left the yard with the bases loaded. Then pass ball, you score on that. I mean, the team fought back and appeared, for people who care about this, to be good energy in the dugout. Like, they, all that stuff was there. It's just, at times this year you have not had the bats to compete. But yesterday it was really just that you, I think, ran out of pitching. And that issue was obviously increased by the fact that you had to throw Evans on Sunday. Maneri has talked about just really liking the idea that you have a guy you can trust to go out there on these midweeks and just go deep into games potentially, and he's done that really since he was put in that role. And Eskew gets hurt, so then Evans is pitching on Sunday, and now that you basically had a bullpen game, and we knew it was going to be a game where there was a lot of pitchers, but it ends up being 12 guys.
12.
I mean,
yep.
And it was going to be, hey, everybody goes an inning. That only really flies, though. We see it even in MLB if everybody's on, and so I think they felt like they had to go bullpen game, but it just obviously did not work out. Too many free passes, man. Like
11 walks. I mean, and 2 hit batters.
They can. And I know this is one of those things is easier said than done. You can't just throw the ball right down the middle. But, make them blast off on you at this point. At the point that you're seeing it's an issue, you just got to go in there and throw strikes, man. And yeah, you may give up 5 hits in a row if you're a pitcher and you throw it right down the middle. But most coaches actually would prefer that to just walking the yard because, frankly, maybe they hit one at somebody, you know?
Put it in play. Again, they can get on top of it, get underneath it, and get some outs that way. But, yeah, when you get them free passes, walking the bases loaded, all that kind of stuff, which, again, is becoming a consistent problem with this team, it's definitely something you hate to see happen over and over again.
Yeah, and you don't want to compound the problem by, walk a bunch of guys and then make a mistake, and now,
and boom, grand slam.
Grand slam, multi-run home run, right? Like, you've seen some of that. And, kind of the opposite side for South Carolina, a lot of we've seen solo home runs. I feel like I don't have the data in front of me, but that's been a talking point even for Paul Mainieri this season, is a lot of times solo home runs. Okay, great, hit a home run, need some guys on base.
Yep.
We need 3 runs instead of 1. We've kind of seen, last night you saw perfect storm of giving up some homers, yes, but giving up way too many walks. I mean, you can't give out, what'd you say, Tyler, 13 free passes total between walks and hit batters. And then when you do throw the ball over the plate, you make a mistake, and then they hit it out of the park. And that kind of compounds the problem. On the other side, you've struggled many times throughout the year with not having guys on base, or when you do, not being able to capitalize, right? So I think the question is, there's still a lot of season left to play. They're going to go out there and play it. And you did see fight last night, which is good, but it's kind of, we're not to the end of season basketball comparison on the question because it's still early, but you do know you have an extremely difficult schedule remaining. We all know that. You got Tennessee coming in here this weekend. You know you've got to turn it around. You know that there hasn't been give up in this team. So the question is, how much can you improve? And last night, Mainieri said, we've got things that are fixable, right? So my question is kind of, which things are the most fixable? Your roster is what it is. It's like Steve Spurrier said, can't trade them. You've got some pieces. You've got some guys that could play better. You've got some pitchers that have done some good things for you. So can you put it together? Like, what can you tweak? What can get better to make you a little more competitive in the win-loss column?
Yeah, and I think that starts with your pitching rotation at this point in time where, again, you've already shifted things around with moving back to the bullpen and bringing Brandon Stone in, and you've got a mixed bag of results out of that, through 2 games. And, sure, he looked fine after he settled in, after he got his allotment of warm-up pitches, against Oklahoma and all that, or didn't get allotment of warm-up pitches against Oklahoma, settled in the second inning after that, and started off okay against against Arkansas this past weekend. They got blasted in the third, didn't get helped by some errors in the field as well. But you don't have the most confidence in him at this moment. Obviously, Jarvis Evans came in there and did a solid job considering the fact he was thrust into a start on Sunday on less than a week's rest there. So you have some promise with him. But what does that look like this weekend? Do you shift things around, change things drastically, or do you keep going with what you have and hope it's going to get better? You don't really know at this point.
Yeah, well, is Eskew back? They hope he's going to be back, Mainieri said. But, I mean, anytime you're talking about somebody getting hit in the head, as we know, it's there really is no timeline for those things. It's just, do they, if he's in concussion protocol, do they pass it? Are you showing any symptoms? All those things factor in. So there may be one plan for that, but that plan may be contingent on, hey, is Eskew healthy? I thought Evans stood in a tough situation and threw the ball well on Sunday, and so maybe that factors in. But here's the thing: you're also going through, like, the SEC slate. We know does not let up, but you're going through what you could have already circled as being the most difficult part of a difficult schedule. So this is, yes, you're getting exposed. I think the key for South Carolina moving forward, and obviously I think not that they're going to look past this weekend, but in terms of just if you want to start talking about this season, it's going to be tough to beat Tennessee, even though it's at home. Can you just, once the competition lets up just a little bit, start to play a little bit better, find exactly what your best sort of couple of lineups are based on righties and lefties, and find some momentum going into kind of the final stretch of the season? Because the crazy thing about baseball is you play so many games, like, it feels daunting, but then you blink and you're talking about the stretch run. The stretch run will be here before we know it. And, Carolina, the one saving grace is, to an extent, they have taken care of the teams they're supposed to beat. So you don't have these just blemishes on your record otherwise. But let's call it what it is. You've got some ugly losses in there. The last four, really.
Are you shooting for, do you already have a number? I know this is a moving target, but how many SEC wins do you need
to get in the postseason?
Yeah. That's the goal. Nobody's looking at this thing going right now, can we hope? You don't care at this point. Get in.
I mean, the magic number is always around 500.
Mm-hmm.
Now, depending on the quality of the opponents that you beat, if you took 2 out of 3 against Tennessee this weekend and then dropped 3 against Mississippi State after that, a little different of quality opponent in terms of where they're ranked and stuff like that. So, you got to be somewhere around 500. You can maybe be 14 or 13 if you have good enough wins in there.
Last year, they're 13-17.
Yeah.
Got in.
Yeah, that's true.
You don't want to bank on that.
You don't want to bank on that. But you got to be flirting somewhere around 500, a little below that, to feel comfortable, if that's the right word to get in.
Well, and to your point, Wes, you look up and down. You don't look at this thing. You are in a very, very, you've had a very tough stretch. Now, it does not get easy. Is there an argument to make that it gets easier? Yes, in a relative sense. For example, you play at A&M. A&M's 0-6 right now. Now, they may end up being really good. Teams can certainly get better. Florida has gotten off to a rough start. Some of the other SEC teams that you're going to play are not the caliber of a Tennessee or a road series at Arkansas. So, my point is, it's doable to, I think, get to that number, especially when you look at South Carolina taking care of business in the midweeks and things like that. But even to get to that number, you're going to have to turn things around from, you're going to have to make some of those improvements that Maneri's looking for.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I don't think there's a number. I think it's more just, you're off to such a start that I don't even think you can think about a number. I think you just got to think about playing better. And if you play better, you just kind of hope that it all falls into place. Now, I think much like we've seen as the conferences have gotten stronger, as the SEC has gotten stronger in other sports, and then even to an extent in baseball last year, we started, a South Carolina team that won 13 league games, got in. So has that number slowly kind of dropped? I looked at Arkansas's record in basketball when they came here, a few weeks ago, and I was like, this team is in? And then not only is that team in, but they're in the Sweet 16. So the sort of level of what you have to do is constantly changing, and the SEC probably will be as good as it's ever been this year in baseball. So I think you look at that and, you just got to start finding wins at some point, though. You know what I'm saying? You start trying to count them, and it just is daunting.
Well, next opportunity comes against number 1 Tennessee this upcoming weekend at Founders Park. I have some tickets to give away Friday night, the series opener. I have 1 pair for caller number 4 at 803-404-6100. And the series finale coming up on Sunday at 5 o'clock over at Founders Park. I have a family 4-pack of tickets to caller number 6. Again, caller number 4, you get a pair for Friday night. Caller number 6, a family 4-pack for Sunday afternoon. We'll dive into spring football. Let's hear what some of the assistants had to say yesterday in Speaking to the Media. Coming up next, it's Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs on your Wednesday on The Game.
All right, guys, you know what? This show presented by our friends over at Firehouse Subs. Almost lunchtime. Time for you to hit up firehousesubs.com or the Firehouse Subs app. Hopefully you already got that thing downloaded. I hit up some Firehouse Subs earlier this week. Went with my favorite, the brisket add bacon. But if you're wanting to try something new, we've been telling you about the new Hot Ones featured zesty garlic hook and ladder and spicy dill hook and ladder. Of course, the spicy one is so spicy that they actually have a little disclaimer here telling you that you should not consume it if you can't handle the Carolina Reaper. But if that's something you like, if you like to kind of push the limits, this one is a 10 on the hot scale here. That pickle is what kind of puts it over the top in terms of heat. Soaked in the Last Dab Reaper Edition Hot One sauce. If you want something a little bit more mild but still good, hit up the zesty garlic hook and ladder. All that for you now at Firehouse Subs.
And welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West and Chris along with you here on the game. Wednesday means it's officially 1 week since spring practice began. A couple of practice sessions in the books. And as we're going to hear throughout the spring, a lot of assistants getting to talk to the media, guys we don't usually hear from during the season. And yesterday that included Mike Furry, of course, wide receivers coach, going into his second year in that position here at South Carolina. talking about a number of things, and a couple of different things I want to hit on here is kind of what's going on in the wide receiver room. We'll start off with, I think, the biggest question that anybody has when it comes to the wide receiver room is obviously the progression and development of Nick Harbor, especially considering the fact that he's focusing solely on being a wide receiver and playing football in this offseason as opposed to track. And here is Coach Furry yesterday giving his thoughts on Nick Harbor coming into form as a wide receiver.
I think the biggest thing is maturity, right? And you know, I without getting too much into it, and Nick can speak a lot about it on his own and when he talks to you guys. But I think when you look at a Nick Harbor, I think everybody's expectations for Nick exceeded what his expectations were because he was so inexperienced at playing the position. And but when you look at his body size, you would just assume that he would be able to go out there and just dominate every game and every situation. Well, there's a lot that goes on to play wide out. I mean, it's not just running. I mean, you got to run as fast as you can. You got to get in and out of transitions. You got to be able to snap your head around. You got to be able to catch the ball when it's in flight, and you better be able to catch that ball while you're running 100 miles an hour after at that ball. There's a lot that goes on, and he just hasn't. He hadn't at that time really experienced a lot of that stuff, right? It was all just speculation. And I think now the biggest thing for Nick that we're all excited about, including himself, is he's caught balls in games. He's went and got footballs. We've relied on him on some past stuff last year, and I think towards the end of the season, the touchdown against the Missouri, I think it was, or the ball he caught over the shoulder against Missouri, and then the touchdown coming back against Akron or whatnot, and kind of starting to get in the flow of things. That builds that builds confidence, right? And I think the more and more he becomes confident with himself, the more and more we'll start exceeding our expectations of what we think of Nick Harbor. And I think the other thing too for Nick, I think the best thing about Nick is, I told Nick this the other day, the best thing that ever could happen to Nick is these six freshmen that are coming in. Because they don't, they're going to come in here and just do everything they can and do it right and do it as fast as they can, and he's going to be able to learn from them a little bit too, of how you're supposed to do stuff and see it the right way, and then be able to go out and emulate that also and add that to his game. And so it's kind of hand in hand with him coming back with experience, and then the new guys coming in that are going to be able to push him. And he's had 3 really good days here at spring.
This isn't a new conversation we've had about Harbor. Really kind of had this since he got to campus, and when you hear Coach Furry say that, again, the guy that's been a wide receiver at the highest level, maybe it resonates with people a little bit more. There's so much nuance to this position. Again, it's not just being fast and being able to outrun somebody. You got to be able to run your route, jump up, catch the ball, bring it down, secure it, take off and run, break tackles, all those kind of things that, being a part of the team for half the year doesn't give you the ability to round into true form with that quite how you want to. And for the past 2 years he's been on campus, he's not been there for a full spring practice. This year's different. And again, instead of starting back at 0 or close to 0, like maybe he had to do last year, it's starting off with where you ended the season, improving on that, and again, hopefully being leaps and bounds better by the time the Virginia Tech game rolls around at the end of August.
Let me also say, guys, I appreciate Mike Ferry for giving these highly detailed answers, and I think certainly in our seat, but I think the fans too appreciate that. This was a thorough, fair, not over the top, too positive, but not negative. It just, hey, this is how we see where things are with Nick Harbor.
It wasn't coach speak.
It was not coach speak, and you got some really few. I would encourage people to listen to his entire press conference or read our transcript. Shameless plug on Gamecock Central, because it had a lot of good detail on a lot of players. And, the thing with Nick is, as we have said, it would also be one thing if you were missing some wide receiver time to run track if you had played wide receiver your whole life. And this is something Charles Power, who's the best in the business, in my opinion, at doing evaluations and works for On3, something he tells us all the time in general about wide receivers is that, guys, there's thousands of kids in high school that play the wide receiver position and play it pretty well. And it's very hard to kind of distinguish which receivers you should take and which ones you shouldn't. And, I think with Harbor, it has always been about the upside. What if this guy can live up to what is elite potential? And it's easy to get caught up in the potential without looking at what's the floor here, so to speak? Like, how much room is there to grow before he starts getting maybe towards the upper end of that potential? Well, frankly, there's a lot of room there because he's not a guy who's been catching the ball in wide receiver camps for his entire life. He's not a guy who's – I mean, how many passes do you catch in your life if you're a wide receiver from day one?
Mike Furry's son, Stone, who's still in high school, catches 200 balls a day.
Great name, by the way.
Outside of practice.
Yes.
You know?
I mean, you're talking about, what, 10,000? I mean.
Yeah, if you're going from Pop Warner to your high school career before you ever step foot on a college campus, easily, probably.
Think about just every warm-up throw, every pregame throw, every practice throw, every throw in your backyard. I mean, it's a cliche, but you have to practice things to get good at them. So what is the thing about to master a craft? What is the number, like 10,000 hours? That's like I feel like is that a Japanese
I can look it up.
Concept? Chris is looking at me like I'm stupid.
No, I'm just curious.
Basically you can master almost anything, but the amount of time you have to put into it is insane. And so for Nick, I just go back to one, he got the taste of success and wanted more last season, and two, he looked around and noticed how much the guys around him had improved by going through spring ball, and he didn't get that last year.
Yeah, and it was so tempting with Nick always. Like, even for, like, I feel like we had a decent amount of background, Wes, in knowing, we didn't just, like, pull up Facebook and see a story about South Carolina landing Nick Harbor, who has 5 stars and ran 10-1 in the 100. Like, all these things, you immediately go, he's going to be a stud. Like, if you don't, have some baseline. But even for me, I'll speak for myself, it was always tempting to go, man, if he could just, put it together like very quickly, because there is such immense physical tools there. But man, being a receiver, like I always say, we lose sight of the number one attribute for a receiver, and that's you got to know how to play the position and catch the ball. And he was not as advanced as others that have been, like you said, Wes, playing the position for like their entire life from youth to now at a high level. He's continuing to make strides there, and we all know he's devoted even more time to the sport this spring. So with him fully dialed in, it's you hear about the strides he's making, and I think we're going to continue hearing more and more in that throughout spring.
By the way, it was Malcolm Gladwell in the book Outliers that said it takes 10,000 hours of deliberate practice to master a craft.
Yeah, and
good one.
I mean, obviously, there are people that say that's not true, whatever. But it is a thought, is a concept.
And again, once you hit hour 10,000, that doesn't suddenly mean you're now the master of it. It's just the thought of it takes a lot of time, a lot of practice, a lot of effort to become good at anything, especially something that you're not starting at zero from, but starting pretty low on the rung compared to other guys around you.
Yeah, and of course it helps that you are 6'5" and can run and are naturally strong and all those things, and are going to be a mismatch for defensive backs, most defensive backs that you face. But again, I think we forget wide receiver is a skill position. It's not, and by skill position, you aren't just talking about a label. You're talking about it is a skill that has to be developed. It's not just go outrun everybody. There's a lot more that goes into it.
We'll get more from Coach Furry coming up next, talking about some of those young freshmen that are going to be challenging Nick Harbor in that wide receiver room as this offseason goes along. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler, West, and Chris on your Wednesday on the game.
If you're out there looking for a local, reliable HVAC service for your home or your business in the Midlands, reach out to our friends over at Krantz Cooling and Heating. KrantzCooling.com, Krantz, cooling with a K, KrantzCooling.com, or give Justin Krantz, the general manager over there, and his team a call, 803-755-0793. I've had Krantz Cooling out to my home several times. They did a mini split for me in the garage. They've checked out all the other units at my house to make sure they're running in tip-top shape. Love my experience so much that when my mom moved to Irmo, I got them to go out to her home, too. They put in 2 mini splits for her. They handle all her HVAC needs as well. They could do the same for you. KrantzCooling.com or 803-755-0793. Since 1983, Krantz Cooling, their team has been providing great service to business owners and families in the Midlands. They can do the same for you.
Welcome back in. It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West and Chris along with you on your Wednesday here in the game. Reminder on Friday, it is the 107.5 The Game Spring Golf Classic. This year, partnership with the Lexington County Gamecock Club. Going to be hanging out there all day long. Unfortunately, all spots have been filled. So if you're already signed up, we'll see you out there with the par 5 golf ball cannon. Also going to be giving away a pair of baseball and football season tickets, 2 lucky winners. And special guest is going to be Gamecock great and Basketball Hall of Famer Alex English hanging out with us there, too. So looking forward to that coming up on Friday. Talking more of what Mike Furry had to say yesterday when talking to the media after a couple days of spring practice in the books. Of course, one of the big stories of the wide receiver room this year is all those young freshmen coming in fighting for playing time. And that's something else that Coach Furry talked about yesterday, was getting the most out of those young guys get this spring.
Yeah, and you really just hit the head, hit the nail on the head there when you speak about you have to identify their strengths, and you got to put them in positions to allow their strengths just to be able to take over and not give them too much. And there's guys here that are really, really smart football players. They're savvy. They have a really good understanding. So yeah, we can move them around to maybe some multiple positions. Some guys are more just, let me just lock in and do my job and feel comfortable so I can go out and just play. And so we kind of identify them and leave them at one position for right now so they can get their feet underneath them. But the biggest thing, as you said, was to identify their strengths. They all have a lot of things in common. They all have the ball skills. They have the big catch radius. I would say that all of them can run pretty good. Every one of them can run pretty good. Bezo's, Brian Rose, pretty explosive. When you look at a 41-inch vert, I think he had maybe this past 2 weeks ago, and then like Cyrus gets in there and breaks the school record for vertical. I hadn't even stepped on the field yet. And so now you start talking about the short area quickness to compare it to a Nick Harbor, where hey, let's get Nick on the run a little bit, but hey, those guys can just line up and you can't catch them. And so just identifying their skill sets. Which is, you add Murph into this category here coming up in May. It'll be fun to kind of see how they all kind of play out with each other and how they all line up. And when you walk off the practice field, you kind of got to go in your office right away so you can go watch these guys run around a little bit. It's pretty impressive, and it's a lot of fun, and there's a lot of coaching and a lot of teaching that still has to be done. But at the same time, I think the word talented is going to be mentioned a lot with that group, and they're super talented.
And look, anytime you're talking about a player or a group of players that have yet to play a snap of college football, you always have to pump the brakes a little bit and not get too far ahead of yourselves. But we've talked about this wide receiver room a lot. You guys have seen these guys up close to personal. Obviously, Donovan Murph still has to join the team a little bit later on in the offseason. But this is a very special collection of guys. And here, backed up by what Coach Furry said there, just in the first couple days being out there on the field or going through drills. And Lex Cyrus apparently setting the vertical record for the school, which is obviously very impressive. And, a lot of build for these guys in a room that does have a lot of openness to it, where these guys could get on the field and play right away.
Well, Brian Rowe can absolutely jump out of the gym. So if our guy Lex Cyrus is out leaping him, I don't know what that means. But Rowe, that's when you watch his film, that's one of the first things you notice is like, hey, this guy's not big, but my man can go up and get the football. And Rowe was one of the first guys that really started to generate their own buzz going back to the bowl game practices when several of the freshmen were able to go ahead and go through that. So, I think it just speaks. You want to talk about traits. All these guys have traits. And, I think there was a time, especially, remember that kind of window of the wide receiver room when, when Debo was kind of the only guy that was making plays in the room, and then Debo moved on, and you, of course, you had Brian Edwards who was a, kind of a superstar, but the room kind of at that point got to a point where it just wasn't athletic enough. Like it felt like Brian McClendon would focus on a lot of bigger guys, and a lot of those guys just did not turn out, I feel like. And guys, I looked at this room, and when you bring in a big class like that, they're not all going to pan out. Like, that's just kind of how it works statistically. Like, it just typically you don't bring in 6 guys and they're just all amazing. The cream will kind of rise to the top. But I think you look at every single one of these guys, and they all have traits. They all have the ability to separate. They all have played a ton of wide receiver, too, which, again, like we talked about with Nick Harbor, that helps. That is very helpful. So I think we're going to be having this conversation for a long time about who's the best out of this group, who's the farthest along out of this group, and that answer may frankly change as this thing progresses.
Yeah, you are bringing in a bunch of guys. You always hear if you're going to miss on athleticism, you've definitely gone the route with this class of taking a bunch of guys who are very athletic, but they are also receivers. I mean, you can go through the high school accolades of these players. They're really good. You know, I mean, I feel like Jaden Sellers is probably getting undersold a little bit from a pretty athletic family.
Good rapport with the quarterback.
Yep, I hear. And had an injury in high school, obviously, that cost him most of a year, but put up big numbers and played in big games in high school. I mean, ask Cutter Woods. Those two had some battles, in state title games. So, Lex Cyrus, that kind of wasn't – it was on my radar that he was fast. He's 10.4 in the 100 meters. He's something like 21.5 or so in the 200. But he was a 6'2" high jumper in high school, and that compares favorably to, Brian Rowe as a sophomore in high school was like 5'10", so I'm sure he got better if he even stayed with track jumping. This guy can leap, and that kind of like slipped my mind, right? And then you got like Murph's coming in, who maybe from a football standpoint has kind of looked like the most ready to play guy. So you combine the athleticism, you've got guys who are also football players and not all on the same level, some more advanced than others, but like they're actually receivers as well, and they have the right mindset. Like that's another thing we've heard. They've come in really ready to work.
I'm curious who Furry was talking about at the end of his press conference when he said he texted another coach basically saying, I didn't quite know this guy had this mindset. And it goes to show, and it was in a positive way, goes to show you no matter how long you recruit guys, no matter how much you try to gather information, you're going to learn something new about them when you're around them every single day. And he didn't name the player, but it caught my attention. Trying to find the exact quote, where he said, some guys have shocked you. Some guys have come here with the mentality that you didn't think they had, maybe a little bit, but didn't see it consistently. Then all of a sudden you get out there and practice. It's kind of like I texted one of the coaches yesterday. He's a completely different player mentally than I expected. Not that that's bad. I didn't think he would be as alert and focused and locked in on a daily basis, but it's been neat. So you're learning about these guys constantly. I'm curious to know who he was talking about, but I will say this to Chris's point earlier. The younger sellers, like I could sit here honestly and make a case for you for all these guys because I think they all have talent. But I was specifically told by somebody who's been around Jaden for some time, but isn't like a family member or anything like that, and said, do not forget about that kid because he has that same quiet, innate confidence that his brother has, where not a big talker, not a rah-rah guy, but snap the football, and he's got something to prove.
Again, you guys have seen all these guys up close playing high school recruits and all that kind of stuff. Do you have a favorite out of the group?
I ain't going there. I'm not going there.
No, I think you could make a case for all of them. Like the one thing I have said kind of on the record is I have felt like, I might very quickly change my opinion, I have felt like Murph was the most ready to play. He's the one that's not on campus, right?
Yeah.
So will that shift? I think they all have their strengths. I will also say on Jaden Sellers, when we saw him in camp, I think this is before he was committed. It was like a couple summers ago. I walked away. Shocked is too strong of a word, but like just the way that he carried himself, played bigger than his size, ability to go up and get the ball, route run. It was all more than I expected even. And I'd seen his film. I knew he was Jaden Sellers, all that stuff. I wouldn't be surprised if that – I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if that's who Fury was talking about. But either way, a good thing, right? They seem to really like that whole group.
Yeah, we'll have more spring conversation as the week rolls along. Can hear some players coming up later on today as well. We'll come back and wrap up today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs on your Wednesday here in the game. Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler, West, and Chris along with you for a few more minutes here on your Wednesday on the game. Obviously, things did not go well for Gamecock baseball last night, but a huge win once again for Gamecock softball, 6-0 over the rivals in Clemson from the upstate. As Ari Rhodey goes 4 RBIs last night, including a home run. Neil Lamb and Sam Gress combined for 7 scoreless innings, as what's been a great season for Coach Chastain Woodard's team continues to roll on. And more importantly, we've now tied up the Palmetto Series at 5-5-2, with the deciding factor being the April 15th rematch game or makeup game between South Carolina and Clemson in softball.
That was a great win yesterday. It's a Clemson softball program that, let's be honest, like just showed up within the last few years and then was better than South Carolina. Yeah. And that's got to be frustrating as a Gamecock fan. And you kind of, I don't know about y'all, as good as South Carolina was to start this year, I was always kind of looking ahead a little bit like, hey, this would be pretty big for them to beat Clemson as well, just to kind of make a statement, frankly. And not only did they win the game, but they led throughout and won in dominant shutout fashion. Chris, you says first time Clemson's been shut out in softball in a year?
About a year, yeah. That's per the broadcast.
Per the broadcast.
They do their homework.
Yeah, but both of our guests were on there, right?
That's
Kate
right.
and Amanda. So,
Yep.
But yeah, shout out to them. I know this one probably meant a little bit extra for Ashley Chastain Woodard, who obviously played at Carolina and didn't have an opportunity to ever play against Clemson. So probably meant a little extra, and this was a nice win for them, a dominant win for them. And, hey, guess what? Congratulations. Play another top 10 matchup this weekend.
Never gets easier.
It doesn't, but
typical.
But they match up with all these teams, man. Like
they do.
This is they were this close to sweeping a top 15 Texas Tech team this past week.
Yep.
And ran out of time.
Yeah, don't get me started on that.
Literally.
But, yeah, and that was without Ari Rhodey.
Yep.
So Ari comes back, first at bat since missing the weekend, hits a 3-run bomb to set the kind of tone for the entire game last night, I thought.
And I thought made a statement, too, of just, yeah, you shut Clemson out, which is always great to do that against your rival, but also, like, had some adversity where Clemson had the bases loaded, I think, with 1 out. Sam Gress gets a strikeout after she came on, ends up getting out of the inning. You just completely slammed the door. So more locker room celebrations. Remember, Coach Chastain Woodard did say they were kind of running low on the, like, there's been some, it's similar, but it's still fun.
Well, you can repeat dances.
Throw some water.
That's okay.
Yeah.
It's a good problem to have when you're running out of victory dances, right?
Very good problem.
So,
yes,
things going well. We'll have to, I'm sure we'll get it back on here coming up soon. Is again, they'll go on the road to LSU this upcoming weekend for yet another tough series in the SEC. Currently sitting at 2-4 in conference play, but as we talked about, obviously came very close to winning all 3 of those games against Oklahoma the other weekend, dropped 1 against Georgia, and obviously have put together some big wins in the game since then, and back in SEC play coming up this weekend, taking on LSU. We'll get back more into spring football discussion coming up tomorrow. That'll do it for the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs. Halftime show with myself, Terry Ford, up next on your Wednesday here on the game.
Our friends over at Integrated Media can make any of your audio-visual dreams come true at your home. You don't have to use the big box stores. So if you are looking to put a new TV in your home, if you're looking to improve your internet signal, if you're moving, if you're building a new home and you need to have your AV taken care of, you don't have to use those big box stores. You don't have to look at the thousands of different options online. Just give Michael, Nathan, the team at Integrated Media, call 803-948-8327. They can come out to your home just like they did for me, just like they did for Wes. They can help you out with everything from sourcing the equipment, letting you know what's the best, to professionally installing it for you. If you got dead spots in your home, if you want to extend your Wi-Fi signal outside, if you want to build that new man cave or trick out your patio, they can do it for you. 803-948-8327 or visit their website, integratedmediainc.com.